Hey everybody, sorry for the slight delay. We just got off a call with someone else, so just had to wrap that up. So I'm just gonna wait till everyone gets here. For those of you just joining, sorry for like the 2-minute delay. I was caught up in another call, but we're all good now. I'm just gonna give maybe another minute or so to make sure that everybody has a chance to get here, and then we'll get started. Okay, so it's 12:03, so I'm gonna dive right into it. I don't wanna, make this drag on for any longer than anybody's usually used to. So let's go right into this. So hi everybody, my name is Sophie again, and I'm part of the customer success team here at Umapped. So thanks again for joining us for this 3-day boot camp. We're on our final day together, and I just really like to thank everybody for participating every day when you were able to, because I did recognize a ton of names that I've seen over the past 3 days, or even people who are on different time zones but have been diligently watching all of these recordings. Thanks so much. It really, really helps to see. Um, how much people really enjoy this type of content and really lets us know that we should do this again in the future. So thanks again. So of course, every day over this 3-day period, we've been building on what we've learned during the previous sessions. And what I hope that you can take away from this series is how easy it is to create reusable, content-rich documents, vendor profiles, and templates, and how to master the art of sharing these kinds of travel ideas with your clients. So as the theme for today is, as you can see, engaging through collaboration and customization, during today's session, we're going to be demonstrating how you can put together and send off your trips. And this is going to be both in the quote stage and the confirm stage. So I can kind of look at what that would look like for, for both of those different use cases. We're also going to be talking about customizing your client's experience from your account preferences, and then all about the traveler interface and how exactly your clients can engage with their trips. So this might look pretty familiar to some people who've done maybe my intro webinars before, or who have used the trip publisher for a long time and kind of already know what it looks like. But I'm going to drop a couple other things that I think people might not be too familiar with, or just, ways that you can further the experience for you and your clients. So the goal at the end of this session is for you to know exactly how to use the trip publisher for both quotes and confirmed trips, and then how you can tailor your account to ensure the best possible experience for both you and your clients, and what your travelers can expect, so you know how to respond to any questions that might get thrown your way. And as always, we'll leave some time for a Q&A at the end of today's session. So you can feel free to add them to the Q&A or the chat. I'm not really going to look at anything till the end, but I will get to those. And again, anything I can't get to because of time, I always try to reach out via email. And if I ever miss an email, just let us know, by the way. All right, so just a couple more housekeeping items before we get started. Again, at the end of every session, I usually send a follow-up email that will include a recording of the session, some important links to training, as well as some things just to wrap up this series. So any last-minute questions or any resources I can provide. And additionally, if by chance you're still new to Umapped, I just want to make sure that you know how to access a complimentary trial. So from our website, which is umapped.com, you can come to the sign up button at the top right, and then fill out the trial form. And then of course, our customer success team will get back to you as soon as we have all of your account credentials and you're ready to log in. Okay, so with that, let's get started. Okay, so let's go back to my trips. So we're going to start from within the trips dashboard. And now that we've navigated around the trip publisher and we've gotten to know the platform and some of the other features that are contained within the trip publisher, let's put everything that we've learned together and then build a trip before sending it off to our traveler. Okay, so within my trip, I'm going to start by explaining everything that you can do inside of a trip. And then we're going to go over how to maybe put together something like a quote, and then how to put together something like a trip and send it off. So I'm going to begin on the left side of my screen, and then I'm going to explain stuff on the right side of my screen. So, by the way, typically how I like to differentiate between the two sides is that everything on the left side of the trip tends to be ready-made content. So this is where you're probably going to come if you maybe made a booking with a GDS, or you forwarded an email confirmation, or if you have a template that you've been working on, maybe that template had all those base elements that we've talked about, like the activities and the destination content, and you wanted to add it to a trip, or if you wanted to access one of our integrated suppliers or destination content. But typically, all of this stuff in this left-hand side has already been created, so to speak. Even if it's, from our destination content and it hasn't necessarily been booked, quote unquote, it still has already been created. Versus everything on the right side of the screen, so what I can access clicking on the plus button, are all things that I have to create manually. Now, of course, I could call up some of those vendor profiles that I created by clicking on the plus button, but this is still something that I'm working on manually. So even if I'm using those profiles, I still have to add those pertinent traveler details because they haven't been already booked and added from a GDS or from directly with the supplier. So let's say I was beginning a quote, and I'm not going to be using import bookings because I haven't actually booked anything. I just want to get to put together some of those different profiles that we've already created so that I can send off the idea of a trip to one of my clients. Now, there's a couple different things I can do here. We can always import a template that we previously created from the left-hand side over here. So that's where I could easily take in, maybe 5 or 6 different things that I saved in a template and quickly add them to my trip. As you can see, we're in Trip Across Canada, where yesterday I added all of those walking tours in the Royal Ontario Museum. And yeah, so the walking tour of Toronto's past. I'll just delete the additional one. And I can also add my destination content. So from here, we actually have partnerships with 2 different destination content providers, either Afar or W Cities. Or if you've already started building up your own document library, you can add a page from one of your documents here. So we're going to go ahead and actually add a couple pieces of destination content just to kind of buff up the trip proposal that I'm already creating. So in Afar, this little toolbar, I'm going to write Toronto, and I'm going to pull up the Afar destination guide for Toronto. And now if everything here looks good, I can always add this to my trip just by clicking on that. One thing I do want to mention, by the way, before we actually add this to my trip, is I've noticed in the past, let me just pull it up again, Toronto, Canada. I've noticed in the past that there are some agents that don't really like having this see more on afar.com link from Afar. Completely understandable. This is part of our agreement with Afar. So for the moment, we're not able to actually remove it. But one thing that I usually like to recommend as a workaround is that if you really like the information here in the Afar destination guide, like this overview of Toronto, because it has quite a lot of really good info, you can always just copy and paste, I should say, this information into your own documents in your document library. That way I can add this again from add from library without necessarily having that, that link to Afar that a lot of people aren't super keen on. So that's one way around it. I know some people don't have a problem with it. That's totally, of course, cool as well. But I just want to give options for if you really do enjoy this content from Afar, you could still save it to your own personal library and remove this link from appearing. But if I'm all right with this and I do want to add it to my trip, I can do so just by clicking on this Add to Trip button. And then I'm going to choose a date. Typically, of course, because this is a little bit of a longer guide, I am going to add it to the end of my trip and then confirm that date. And then if I wanted to go ahead and add a point of interest or a W Cities guide, I'm actually going to just do W Cities because these two are very, very similar. So there's no reason to show both. Again, in the city, I'm going to put in Toronto, Canada. in the source, I can choose what kind of guide I'm looking for, so I can kind of refine the search. By default, it's going to be on city guides, but I can also look up attraction or dining if I want to give restaurant recommendations. I actually will for this purpose, for this example, and I'm going to search. And then everything here, if I want to add to my trip, maybe for set, let me just see what's here. Oh, like Aloe, because I've been to Aloe a few times. We'll click on the checkbox to the right, and then we'll come back up to the top. And then you have this option to add to trip. Again, just choose a date. I'll choose the 5th, and then confirm that date. And then lastly, this add from library option allows you to add a page from one of your documents. So I'm going to go ahead, and I actually have a document called Agency Documents, wherein I have a page for a before you go checklist. So I want to maybe add that before you go checklist. So I'll look up the name of the page, and then I'm going to search. And then voila, I have a copy as well, but this is the one that I was looking for. And I can actually tell the difference because of the fact that the cover photo shows right here, as well as the name of the document, as well as a little glimpse into what's contained in this page. And then I'm going to click on copy to add that to my trip. Now, of course, if I go back to my trip by clicking on trip at the top of the left-hand side, whenever you add a page from your documents, automatically it's going to go to the top of my trip. But again, I can always change the date of this. I believe we talked about this yesterday, just by clicking on view details and either selecting the calendar icon to change exactly what date it shows up on. I actually think I'm going to keep this on the first day because it is a before you go checklist. Or I can click on the edit, the little pencil icon, and link it to a trip segment. So maybe if I wanted it to come after a car rental or after an activity, I can always do that. Or let's say it's on, I want it to be at the first day of my trip because, it's a before you go checklist. Why not have it at the very top? But I already added a note that got added to the top before. So this got added second because it's the second page I've added. So let's say actually I would prefer the before you go checklist to come before the Algonquin Provincial Park note. Because these are on the same day, I can actually drag and drop these into a new order. So now the before you go checklist is appearing before Algonquin Provincial Park. So like I said, this can only occur if it's on the same day, just to minimize any user error. You don't want to accidentally drag something, that's supposed to be on day 1 to day 7. But if it's on the same day, you can always reorder things to your liking. I can even take Algonquin Provincial Park. Oh no, because it's at the first day. So let's say this was on January 1st. We'll just add that with the date. We could put these in a new order. But you'll see if I try to take this walking tour that's on January 1st and move it below the Chateau La Motte, which is on January 2nd, I can't, not letting me do it. Okay, so that's how you can add your destination content. And then of course you can add any documents that you might have from documents here. This is where you can import from your document library. So I can add that full document, which I've already done. I'll actually also go ahead and click add document and look up an agency document. And then I'll just click the checkbox and add that. And if you have any file attachments like vouchers or e-tickets or a brochure, you can come to the second tab, File Attachments, and then add anything you like here. So for instance, I'm going to attach a file and I'm going to add, I think I have a voucher and an e-ticket on my desktop. I'll add both at the same time and then just go attach file. And then just by the way, you can upload multiple files and multiple photos at once nowadays. So if you didn't know you could do that, you can actually do that now. And then here I go. Of course, you can always change anything just by clicking on the options icon and clicking on preview, edit if you want to change the name. Like I don't want to have this little docx showing, so I'm going to get rid of that and update it. I could do the same thing for PDF on either of these. And also, if I grab this file, I can also drag it into a new order, if it lets me. There we go. Drag it into a new order. All right, so let's go back to our trip. And now let's say I've added all of the content that I need to from the left-hand side. And now I want to start adding those different profiles that I created in my vendors because nothing has been confirmed yet. I just want to give some options. I'm going to come to the little plus sign, the add icon in the bottom right. And then I'm going to choose whatever segment I'd like. So let's say I want to start with an accommodation. I'm going to click on accommodation. And then here in the hotel field, I can add whatever I'd like. So actually, for the purpose of this example, I'm just going to delete my Chateau La Motte, just so I can show you what to do. So we're going to come back here in accommodation. And in the search hotel, we're going to look up Chateau La Motte. Oh, 1 second. We're just going to put a little chapeau on top of my chateau. And there we go. So you're going to see your suggestion here from your vendors. You can tell again that this is something that you've created because of these 2 asterisks. So when I select that, all of those vendor profile information, those pieces of information that I added previously to the vendor profile, such as the address or the contact info or the website or any of the different photos, are automatically going to populate here. And then all I need to do is add whatever pertinent traveler details I need. So like I'll add my, actually no, it's not confirmed, so no booking number, but we are going to add maybe a check-in date. We'll do the 3rd, and we'll check in a checkout time. Sorry, checkout date. We'll do the 5th. The standard times, by the way, for check-in and checkout are going to pre-populate as 3 p.m. and 12 p.m. You can, of course, change this. There's no reason that you can't have this before. But these are just the standard times, so they're why they automatically populate like that. And you can always click on the calendar, by the way. Sorry, not the calendar, that little hour, the clock. I don't know that word in English, wow. The clock to choose a new time. And then we're going to add to trip. And because I already created this profile in my vendors previously, all of that info is already there. And the only thing that I need to focus on is whether or not I want to include information in any of these different fields. Because if you don't include them, they're just not going to appear on the trip at all. So they're not going to be, empty or not display. They just won't show up. So if I choose to include a room like a room, for instance, I can click on add room, maybe give this a first name like Sophia, last name O'Donnell. The room type could be deluxe suite. And maybe there's some amenities like Wi-Fi, pool, and actually not pool, kitchenette, etc., whatever else I'd like. And then bedding, status, whatever. And then we'll update that. And that's going to show here. And you can see also a little indicator on the actual hotel segment that I've added a room. Just so you can quickly, by the way, if you ever click on that little indicator, it'll give you all of that room info right away. And the same thing, I can add pricing if I'd like. So if I want to be able to say what the pricing is going to be for this particular hotel, I can say 600 maybe for the time, or I can give a cancellation policy or any additional details. This might be a good place to add details like if the pool is closed or if the restaurant's under renovation or something of that nature. And you also have the option to add files. So this is a great way where you can add, like I said earlier, a brochure if you need to, or an e-ticket for an activity. This can all go here. And let's say, I did create this in my vendors earlier, but maybe I'm not so keen on the second photo anymore because just doesn't really suit the particular clients that I'm sending this off to. I always have the option to change whatever I put in the vendor profile just by clicking on the photo icon, the camera icon, I should say, at the top of the segment drawer. So when I click on this, you're going to see, by the way, that because I've already created this as a vendor, it says photos when I hover over it. I'm going to be in my edit photo screen. So this is where I can choose to show the photos, or maybe I don't want to show photos at all. Actually, for the majority of the time, you're probably going to want to, but this is always an option. Otherwise, by default, I'm going to be in my hide photo mode. And that means if maybe there's a photo that I'm not incredibly keen on for this particular set of clients, I can click on this photo until it grays out and then come down here to hide the photo. Now, I didn't actually delete it from my photo from the vendor altogether. I've only hidden it from this particular iteration of the vendor. So this ensures that I'm not actually making any edits to the vendor at large. Anyone else that's used that vendor will still have access to that second photo. But maybe for this particular set of clients, it wasn't the most appropriate photo. It didn't really show the room that I wanted to show, or I just didn't really like it in this context. I can hide it so that it doesn't show on this person's itinerary. And then otherwise, if I toggle this second tab to the right, I'll be in my reorder photo mode, and then I can quickly reorder things. So I can show the room first and then the actual outside second, or the other way around. If I ever want to, I can always add more photos as well, just by clicking on add photos at the bottom. And lastly, if you've ever made a mistake, I removed that photo, but I really actually wanted to show it, you can always click restore default to restore to whatever's actually in the vendor profile. And if you ever need to, there's always the option to edit the vendor profile as well. So I can come here to edit any of the information, take out the phone number, put in a Facebook link, whatever I'd like. And then I'll just cancel that. I'm not going to save it in this case. I canceled it because I restored it to default. So now I can actually go ahead and add even more information. So let's say I'm going to add a couple more segments, like I'll add another transportation field. I'm going to call this one road trip day 2. And in the start date, I'll put January 6th until, January 6th, same thing. And I can make this start time a particular time if I wanted to, or I can omit it entirely just by leaving it as 12 a.m. and 12 a.m. So this is just a little tip for anybody that didn't know. Even though it says that the start time is mandatory, if I leave the start time and the end time as 12 a.m., it's just not going to show at all. Or if I want to add a start time, but I know that there's not really a set end time and I'm not really sure when they're going to arrive, I can always say that the start time is something like 10 a.m. But if I set the end time for the exact same time, so, start time is 10, end time is also 10, then it's only going to show the start time when I add this. I can add a pickup location and a drop-off location if I want. By the way, right now I'm not pulling from one of my profiles. I'm just adding this. Maybe it's just something I'm doing off the cuff. There's an option for a contact field if I want to add any phone numbers, or maybe my own phone number if they ever need to reach out. If transportation doesn't really work as the type, you can always change that to something like car rental pickup or public transit or a taxi or a transfer if maybe this is from an airport to a hotel or something like that. And if ever one of these types, by the way, doesn't really suit your purposes, maybe it's something else entirely, you can always add something custom in the label field just to the right of that. Because whatever you put in the label field is automatically going to override whatever's in the type. So I'll give you guys an example of that by adding this as it is. I'm going to leave the type as transportation and leave the label blank and leave the company name as road trip day 2. And I'm going to add it to my trip. And you're going to see right now, by the way, there we go. The start time is 10 a.m., but we don't got an end time. That's great. And you're also going to see this title right now says transportation, because that was the type, road trip day 2. Now let's say I don't really like the way that looks and I want to change it up a little bit. I'll click on the pencil icon. And then instead of the type, in the label right here, I'm going to call this road trip day 2. And then here in the name, maybe I want to call this Toronto to Ottawa or something like that. And then when I go ahead and update this, you'll see that transportation got erased and replaced with road trip day 2. And now it says Toronto to Ottawa instead. So that label field really gives you the ability to customize the segments however you want, because that's going to replace whatever's in the type. So, maybe if they were taking a limousine or something crazy like that, and it's not an option in our types, that's where you can use the label. Or if you want to just make it a little more custom and fun, you can use the label for something like I just did, road trip day 2, uh, something like that. And it just gives you the ability to really customize whatever you're doing. So you don't have to use any of those preset types if you don't want. Now, let's say there's a couple other things I had the option to add as well. I can always add, a flight if I'd like. Uh, right now, I can add a flight. I mean, likely you'll not, but if you ever need to, you can always look up the code for that airline, and I'm going to look up Air Canada. In the flight number, I'm going to put flight 101. Now, you're going to see that the airports just pre-populated and the departure and the arrival times also pre-populated. And I just want to give more of an explanation behind how this happened and why this happened. So we actually have these fields automatically fill out based on historical flight data. What that means is, for some of you, you might know that we have a third-party flight tracker called OAG, and that's what powers all of those flight reminders and notifications that get sent out 24 hours prior to departure. So anytime a flight is recognized by OAG, so let's say somebody at one point put in Air Canada Flight 101, and then OAG got the reminder that this was the correct time, we're gonna actually save that information in our system. So the next person that enters Air Canada Flight 101 is going to have the exact same times and the exact same arrival and departure airports and all that. So of course, if this info is correct, you can always leave it as it is and just add the departure dates. So let's say I'll make this the 7th, the 12th or something like that. But if this information has changed, and that's very possible because like I said, this is based on historical flight data. So typically before March, this was 99% of the time always correct because flights didn't really fluctuate in what time they were departing at and what time arriving at, except in rare circumstances. Nowadays, things look a little bit different. So you might see an incorrect time and an incorrect maybe airport. You can always change this later on. Even though it pre-populated, I can just remove it and put another airport in, like Montreal instead. Or I can change the departure time just by clicking on the little clock and choosing a new time. Here I'll put 9 instead. That's totally off because it would be way longer. So I'm just going to leave this actually as YYZ. And then add to trip. And there we go. And again, if you accidentally added it and then last minute noticed that the times were incorrect, you could just come back here and edit that however you want. And then maybe add the departure terminals and the arrival terminals as well if you find those out a little bit later on. And then update. And then all you have left to do is add any of the pertinent traveler information here. So this is how, if I'm still in the quote stage and I haven't actually booked anything, I can quickly put things together that haven't actually been confirmed and I don't have a confirmation email or a PNR or a res card from client base. I can just add them quickly here and then send this off to my clients. Now, of course, if I have made confirmed bookings, those can be accessed from the left-hand side. So that's where we're going to go to something like import bookings. And we're going to go to the booking inbox, maybe if you have the Sabre Live integration or client base, and we're going to look up either the PNR or the res card. So for instance, I can put in my Sabre Live PNR, for example, and I'll search for that. And then I can click on the little drop-down arrow here to view details of that PNR. And then I can add it to my trip by clicking on that options icon. And then otherwise, as we've explained in the past, there is that second tab, PNR Import, where you can come to import from Sabre Tripcase, Galileo Apollo, or WorldSpan. And the only difference between the booking inbox and PNR Import is that PNR Import is just a copy and paste of that information from your GDS, so there isn't that direct connection between the GDS and the trip publisher. So if you ever make any updates, you just have to come back here and re-upload the PNR. So like I'll do an example with you by putting my PNR and my lead passenger last name and my GDS and importing that. And give me a second for it to success. And then in this particular case, all I added was this little note. In the booking inbox, they typically are the live connections. So this is where you're going to find client base sync if you have the client base connection, or Sabre Live if you have the Sabre Live connection, or if you have Ultimate Jet Vacations or Watu, those are all going to be here. And that is a direct integration. Otherwise, if I made any bookings with a supplier, I can always come to suppliers and pull up one of my bookings. So maybe if I use Classic Vacations, I can come to Classic Vacations and log into my account if my actual stuff pre-populated here. No, it did not. Okay, I'm not going to do that because I don't remember my password or my user ID, but you could log into your account and pull up one of your bookings from there, or from GoGo Vacations, for example, where you would just need to enter your username, your password, and the booking confirmation, or from any of these others, like Project Expedition, Trafalgar, Travel2, etc. Additionally, if you come to the second tab, PDF Upload, there is a way where you can actually add the PDF for one of the supported PDF types, which you can find just by clicking on PDF type. So this is where you can add a client-based invoice, or a Travel2 itinerary, or a Qantas Vacations itinerary, and add the PDF of that here, choose the type, and then upload the PDF. Of course, we talked about destination content and documents. And then we also have the calendar. And the calendar is really interesting because not only can you come here to just look at what you've added, but if you need to make any last minute changes to a trip, maybe this Alo reservation should actually be on the 7th, I can actually drag and drop things here onto a new date, and that's going to be reflected within my itinerary. So if I go back to trip and I look for Alo, you'll find that on January 7th now, instead of, I think it was the 5th before. So the calendar is really, really cool if you have things you want to move around last minute, because you can just drag and drop things into any new order. Now, it's not actually going to change the duration of anything, of course. If when I had Alo on the 5th before, it was only a day long, and that doesn't change here. But it means that, I don't have to go back into the trip, click that pencil icon, and then manually change the dates every single time. I could just drag and drop. Now, typically, I would only recommend this to people that are a little bit more comfortable with the trip publisher, because it's so easy to move things around, there is a little bit of margin for user error. So if you feel comfortable with the trip publisher, I would really recommend this as a time saver. But if not, maybe it is a little more cumbersome, but it's a little bit safer to just come back to trip. And then if something needs to change, like this day one thing, I can click view details, click the pencil icon, and then actually change the start and the end dates manually. Which again, it is a little bit more cumbersome, but you can be ensured that you're not going to make any accidental mistakes. Otherwise, last on the list, we have settings, and this is where you can come to view and edit your trip details. So this is where you can click on that little options icon and duplicate the trip. So if you have a larger trip with travelers, you can come and maybe make a copy of this, and then maybe part of your travelers will be on this trip and part will be on another. So you aren't, not using too many flights or too many different bookings. Or you can come create a new template if you want to save this, etc. You also have up here, by the way, the audit log, and this is a really great resource to check out if you're collaborating with somebody, or if you have the traveler collaboration feature enabled, because you can come here to see what exactly has been modified or added. You can see that there's actually one column here for user ID. So if I'm working with somebody else, I can tell if I've done something or if they've done something. So I can ensure that I always know what everybody's up to. Okay. And now let's say everything's coming together. Maybe at this point, I didn't really add anything confirmed, so I can consider this just a quote at the moment. I should just add some pricing, but let's say it's all good to go. Adding a traveler is also quite simple. There's currently two different places I can add travelers from, either from the left-hand side where it says travelers, or by clicking on the share icon in the blue toolbar and selecting travelers. And quite honestly, there's no difference between them. Uh, Either one would work. The only real difference is if I happen to be somewhere else, like if I was in my documents, it's really easy to just go straight to travelers. That's the only difference. And then I can add my traveler just by clicking on this add traveler button, adding their name, their last name, and their email address. So I can do that with Sophie. And you can see, by the way, that because I add this email so frequently, the first name and the last name are actually saved in our system. So you don't have to add those in. You could just start typing the name. Like I'll do that again. Sophie. It's a little hard to see because of this that just popped up, but you'll see that there's a couple options that popped up. And there we go. And then I'll just add my traveler. And last, of course, you can always click the options icon to remove the traveler altogether if you got the wrong email address. You can preview what was just sent to them, that email right there, which we'll go over in a second. And you can also click on trip email log, and this will let you know if it was when it was sent to them, when the web view was last accessed, at what time. I think there might actually be a small issue with the open and click button for the moment, but regardless, it lists you here when the web view was last accessed. So this gives you a really good indicator of how often they're going through their web view. And if I go back to my trip, the other two icons here are simply either the preview icon where I can see all of the different versions of the trip. So if I want to do any proofing before I send it off, you can always do that. And you can also edit major trip details by clicking on the pencil icon. So if I want to extend this, I can extend this to the 14th. Or if I actually have a couple of bookings that are going to happen before January 1st, but at the moment it's not letting me add anything more because you can't add bookings before the start date of the trip, I can come here and extend the start date of my trip to maybe the 29th of December, and then we'll update that. Okay. So now I've done everything I wanted to do here. So let's move on to your account preferences so we can look at how to customize the traveler experience to best suit your and their needs. So we're going to click on the either silhouette or your profile picture up here in the top right corner, and we're going to select My Account, just like we did with our user profile information. But instead, we're going to select Preferences, which is the tab right next to it. And this is where you can select from the different options, like what layout for the trip PDF you want to use, because we have a few different options in terms of whether you want just the large photos or a combination of large and thumbnails or just thumbnails. And this is where you can turn off and on some of those features like Messenger and Traveler collaboration. It's important to note that you'll see different preferences depending on the plan that you're on. So if you're on the individual plan, this plan doesn't include things like the flight notifications and the messenger. But of course, you can always upgrade again by contacting our customer success team. So this might not look the same to everybody on this call, depending on what your plan you're on. But if you're on the Traveler Professional plan like I am, here are some of the different preferences that you can enable. You have the 24-hour clock. So when disabled, all the trip times are displayed in a 12-hour clock format. And enabling this preference is going to display everything in the 24-hour clock format, which might be good because I don't know about some of you, but I'm from Quebec, so I'm used to the 24 more than the 12. You can turn, by the way, also traveler messaging on. And this enabling this preference allows that two-way communication between you and your travelers. And when disabled, you'll still be able to send messages to your travelers, but they'll just not be able to reply to you. You also have the email notifications. So after enabling this preference, you'll receive an email digest of any messages that you've missed while you're offline. So you might want to consider turning this off if you really don't want anything to go through your email. That's always a possibility. Same thing for traveler messaging, by the way. You might want to turn this off if you don't want your travelers communicating with you through the messenger. If you just want to keep it to email, it might be a good idea to turn that off. And then also we have the traveler collaboration feature. So enabling this preference allows your travelers to add their own bookings and their notes to their itinerary. But if you want to entirely curate their experience, you can always turn that off as well. And we also have these flight notifications. By the way, I know that they're moving around. It's just because if I turn them off, they go to the bottom. So we're just going to go to the flight notifications. So enabling this preference will allow travelers on a trip to receive notifications by email, on the web, and via the mobile app of any day of flight notifications like delays, gate changes, or cancellations. These kinds of flights are tracked starting 24 hours prior to the scheduled departure time. And just as a quick clarification, flight notifications doesn't mean that the actual time on the flight segment in your trip is going to change. Your clients are just going to receive a little message on maybe like the flight segment for January 12th that will say something like, if there's been a gate change, what's it been changed to? Or if there's been a delay, what's the indicate, like how long is the delay? So it's just going to send that last minute reminder when your travelers are about to travel. And then you can always save your stuff just by clicking on save here. So this section really allows you to customize both your client's experience as well as your own. So like I mentioned, if your travelers are in another continent 12 hours ahead of you, you might not be so keen on enabling the messenger feature and might just prefer to stick to email. And then conversely, if you want to communicate with your clients exclusively via the mobile app or the web view, you might want to disable the email notifications so you won't receive any email alerts to clog up your inbox. So these are really good because you can turn them off and on based on what you really prefer to receive or how you prefer to communicate or curate the experience for your clients. And of course, this is also where you can curate that PDF template. And once you've saved your preferences, then you only have to come back to this part of your account if you ever need to make changes to any of your selections. So otherwise, you can just entirely forget about this. Okay, so now the last thing we want to look at is the actual client experience. So what your clients will receive when you send them their itinerary that is built in and powered by Umapped. And this is important to review as we take a look at the different ways that we just looked at the different ways that we can customize the client experience. So when ready, as you know, your client's trips are initially delivered by email, and they're available in those 3 different formats. So there's always an option for everybody to experience their trip, regardless of if they're more tech savvy or less tech savvy. Of course, your trips are always branded for you. You can see all of those contact details I added here in my social media links. And all of the different ways that they can experience their trip are here as well. So they have the View Your Trip link where they can see the web view as well as the PDF, or the App Store and the Google Play Store icons for the Umapped mobile app. And then for anybody that has clients that speak a different language, by the way, there are English, French, Spanish, and Portuguese translations. So like, for instance, this is the French version of the exact same email. And by the way, if you ever need to change the language of the trip publisher, that's also possible as well for French, Spanish, Portuguese, and I think German. You just need to change the language localizer on your browser. So if I, for instance, go to my settings, right now I'm using Google Chrome. So if I go to language, let's change my language to French because that's my second language, move to the top. If I come back to the trip publisher and update this, ça va être tout en français. Donc maintenant, it says nouveau instead. So that's just a quick trip. If you ever need to change the language, you can always do that. Move to top. And then we'll update this. And then get rid of that. Okay, so let's go back to that email. All right, so now we're going to start by clicking on the View Your Trip button so we can look at the web view. We're going to click that. Now, I already logged in before, so I do want to log out very quickly to show you the first thing your travelers see. So the first thing your travelers are going to see in their itinerary is this initial security feature. So they'll just have to enter their email address to validate that they're a traveler on this trip. Now, this at the moment is the default for all trips because we don't want somebody who isn't a traveler accidentally having access to their trip. That's why we're going to be introducing, like we talked about yesterday, the ability to share templates where you don't need to be a traveler. But for trips, this is a mandatory at the moment because otherwise anybody could access a trip if they access the email. So I'm just going to log in. And then the first thing I'm going to see, of course, is all of my user profile information. So all of my branding, my contact information, my company information, etc. Those two different links that I can use to access the web view, sorry, the mobile apps. And then also the download button for those two different copies of the PDF. So either the full PDF, which has all of the photos in it, or the print friendly option, which just doesn't have any images. And then they could just scroll through here to access everything within their trip. And if you have anything like this hotel here where there's additional photos, they can always click on the photo icon at the bottom to scroll through those photos. You'll see I really wanted to remove that because it was kind of blurry and I didn't realize when I added it, but this one's perfect. And then next to that, the chat icon displays where they can send you messages. So if this is still in the proposal stage, I might say something like, this looks really cool. Is there a spa or something of the sort? And then send that off. And then of course, because I have the traveler messaging on, the travel agent, myself, will receive this notification and I can either reply back from within the trip publisher or I can reply back from my email since I received an email copy of this, whatever one I'd like. And we can go back and forth and really discuss what we'd like because this traveler messaging feature is included on every single segment. So I've got one on this here. I've got one here on this particular hotel. So as the traveler, I can go through every single segment and say like, okay, for this one, I really like this, but can we change the room? I want something with a better view. And then I can see on my end exactly where they left me this message. So I know what segment they didn't like or what they did like. So that's how you can use the traveler messaging feature, not just during the trip while they're traveling, but even beforehand while you're still deliberating what to be added and what should be taken out. And then of course, they can always leave you a message on the overall trip chat just by clicking on the message button at the top here. And you can see, by the way, all of those details I added for the room are included right here. I didn't really add a whole lot of pricing stuff. I should have probably put like the currency and other things, but that's going to display here as well. You'll see there's also that traveler collaboration button here on the right-hand side, excuse me. So they can add maybe their own restaurant reservation if they've added something mid-journey, their own note if they want to keep notes of their trip throughout their excursions, anything they'd like. They can even invite another traveler if they'd wanted. And again, that doesn't mean I can edit anything because I can only add things as the traveler. I can't edit anything my travel agent has done. That's where I would write on the trip chat if I liked or didn't like something or wanted to be removed, but that's always an option. And then up here at the very top, there's a couple other tabs. So we do have that document tab for all of the documents that we added, including the vouchers, the e-tickets, my agency info, all of these. And of course, if I click read for the different documents that I've added, all of those interactive features I added earlier, like the map and the photos, if I added any links or if I added videos, those are all going to be accessible here. So I can close that. I can look at Lake Ontario where I added a map, all that stuff. And then beside that, there's also this overall trip map, which pinpoints all of the different destinations that your clients are traveling to. And this is powered by Google Maps again, so they can interact with this however they want. And then lastly, there's this trip calendar where they can come to see the calendar view, or if they like using Google Calendar like I do, or another kind of calendar like an Outlook calendar or an iCal, they can actually add this calendar directly to one of those systems so they can maybe keep track within their work calendar when they're on vacation. Okay. And then of course, I'm just going to share my full screen because I do also have that mobile simulator to show you um, the mobile app so you can see what this would look like. Now, personally, what I think is the best quality of the app is the fact that once you've downloaded your trip onto your phone, you don't need Wi-Fi or data to access it later on. This is only necessary for if they need to make any updates. Like if you've pushed an update, they'll need Wi-Fi or data to get that update. But otherwise, if you know they're going to be without data or Wi-Fi for an extended period of time, this is a really great way to ensure that they'll still have their trip and not need Wi-Fi or data like they might need with the web view, which does require a Wi-Fi or data connection. And there's absolutely no difference between the two. You'll see that documents are here, the are here, messaging are here, maps are here, all of that stuff. I can even get all of that additional info, like if I go into my Chateau La Motte guest house, all of the photos are still here and I can scroll through them. All of the contact info is still there. All of the room details are there. For hotels and for flights, I'll also see directions and live weather reporting. Only for hotels and flights, by the way, but it is a really good addition. And the only real difference between the two, you'll even see, by the way, that there's that ability to add bookings. The only real difference between the two is that there isn't a set calendar button in the mobile app. And that's actually because if I go into a trip that already started, like, do I have one that already started? No, I do not. Let's go to a past trip and see if it works. Let's say this, for instance. No, it's not going to do it. I'll go back to my future trips. Anyways, if you have a trip that already started, like I don't, like Florida Adventure for the Smiths, for example, it'll automatically scroll you down to the closest date. So right now it's scrolling me to the 29th of November because that's, oh yeah, this one already started because we're not in November. So it automatically scrolled me to the 29th because that was the only segment in the trip. So it's automatically going to have that calendar already embedded within the mobile app. Okay, so let me share my regular screen again. And now finally, second, if you're ever not sure, by the way, of how to explain some of these different elements to your traveler and how they can register for the mobile app or how they can engage with their web view or the map and all that stuff, we do actually on our support portal under the registering as a traveler in the mobile app solution, have a video called Overview of the Traveler Experience. So if anybody wants this, by the way, I can send them this video, but this video actually is directed towards the travelers and it explains everything they need to know about using the mobile app, using the web view, using the PDF, etc. So this is made to be shared directly with your travelers so that you don't have to explain anything for them. So if anyone, by the way, is interested in this, they can either come to this solution, the registering as a traveler in the mobile app on the support portal, or just let me know in the comments and I can send you one right after this today. Okay, so I think, let's just check over. All right, so over the course of this webinar, we've kind of gone over all of the larger details of sending off your trips, customizing their experience via your account preferences, and navigating throughout the traveler interface. So at this point in time, we're almost at that hour mark. So I do want to transition into the Q&A because I don't want to spend too much, I don't want to take away too much time. But if anybody does have to leave right now, that's totally fine. We are nearing the hour anyway, so you can always leave now. And I'm going to share a recording that will include this Q&A section towards the end later on today. So thank you again, everybody, for participating. I'm going to dive right into the questions and let's get to it. Okay. All right. Yes, Evelyn wanted me just to review the different process of adding documents versus destination content to your library. I think you mean to a trip. We're just going to start with that. So the first thing I'm going to say is in your actual document library here, you're only adding your own personal documents. So you're going to start by creating a document. And then when you have that document created, like I do with About Ontario Parks, then you add your pages. You can either add a real page, like a new one, sorry, I should say, or an existing page. But these are all your own personal content. Like there's nothing here that's been, not like with vendors where there's a preloaded database. With documents, it's everything you've created. And when you're adding them to your trip, like I did with Trips Across Canada, there's two different ways to add it. I can either come to Documents and add the entire document here in Content from Library. Again, the way that you can make that association is that if you're adding a full document, you're of course going to come to the one that's labeled Documents. But if you're not adding a full document, maybe just a couple of pages, you're going to want to come to Destination Content. And here you also have those Afar and W Cities guide options, as well as the Add from Library. So again, if you ever need to really understand the difference between the two, just remember Documents is for that full document, and it also doesn't get added into the main body of the trip. So if we come to my web view again, you'll notice Documents is an entirely separate tab versus some of the pages that I added to the main body of the itinerary here. So like Algonquin Provincial Park, that's in the middle of my trip, versus up here in Documents, I have that full Ontario Parks document. It's just about making sure that, documents can be quite large. You can add pretty much an infinite amount of pages to them. So we don't want something with an infinite amount of pages clogging up your actual itinerary. So it's relegated off to another space. Okay. Yeah, the calendar, Dana said she loved the calendar move around feature. Yeah, a lot of people don't know about this because I do think that this is something that can very easily invite user error if ever you're not incredibly comfortable and maybe like one day you accidentally didn't know you moved this over. So I do think you do need to be comfortable with the trip publisher, and maybe you've used it for a little while before you use the calendar. But once you have and you know that you don't have a problem with moving things around, this is a huge time saver because if something happened and the whole trip got moved over by a couple of days because of, I don't know, maybe weather conditions or something like that, you could just drag and drop literally all of the bookings here and it would be so quick. So this is really, really great for those kinds of things. Okay, cool. So a lot of people have also asked for the video. That's really good. Mark also asked, when you have larger documents, can you advise about page breaks being correct? Okay, so this is a good question. So I'm just going to open up the PDF so we can look at this together. So if any of you, by the way, ever use the PDF rather than using the web view or the mobile app, because maybe your clients prefer having that paper copy, you do have the ability to also edit the way that segments are displayed on the PDF. And we can do that by going back into the trip publisher. And then let's say, maybe in the PDF, maybe I like the before you go checklist being at the very top, but because, it's not really day one, maybe road trip day one was my first thing. My gosh, everything's in French, by the way, sorry. I translated this too many times. But let's say you wanted this to be on its own separate day because it's the first thing that you clients, like the first destination they're actually going to. You can go into the trip, find that segment, click on View Details, and then you guys are going to notice that there's this little icon of a tag, like a little luggage tag. If I click on that, I can actually add PDF page breaks before or after. So if I want to add one before, this is what's going to look like. I'll refresh this, scroll down. Actually, no, maybe I need to open a whole new one. My bad. Let's open a whole new one. Download, come here. So now you see before you go and the traveler arrangement comments are all here, but the road trip only actually starts on the second page. And this might be really good if you want to make sure that this first page where you just have some notes and some content that they needed to read, it's on its own separate page, but my trip doesn't start at the same time as this. It has its own page where it's laid out properly. And you can do this for any segment. So if you find anything's displaying a little bit wonky, you don't like the way it looks, like look right here where it says aloe, it's on mardi, janvier le 5. Maybe I don't like the way this is looking because it squished everything really weird. I'm going to go back into the trip publisher. I'm going to find aloe on the 5th, right here on the 8th. I'm going to view details, change my tags, add a PDF page break before. And then I'm going to open up the PDF, download it, and then I'll just come down to where it says aloe. And now aloe's on its own day right there. So, I mean, not its own day, its own page, I should say. So you can ensure that the way things are displayed are exactly the way you'd like it. Enter live. Okay, let's see what else. Oh, Thomas asked, could you please briefly explain how to best add a collaborator, like a third party, and co-brand? Okay, so this is a good question. It involves quite a few things. So I'm going to give people a lot of info right now, as well as a lot of options. All right, so you'll notice, by the way, when I clicked on the share icon, there's this option to add a collaborator. Now, a collaborator can mean a lot of different things. This can be a supplier, this can be a tour operator or a DMC. If you're the DMC, collaborator could mean another travel agent. If you're a travel agent, maybe you're collaborating with somebody else in another company. You can always use collaborators for that. This isn't necessary, by the way, if you're in the same company, because you can access each other's trips. But if you're in other companies, this is a really, really good feature. So for the purpose of today's example, I am going to take the role of travel advisor. And let's say I wanted to collaborate with a DMC. So I'm going to click on collaborators. I've already added my DMC, but I'm going to remove them and do this again. So now that I'm in my add collaborator space, I'm going to click on add collaborator. And I'm going to either add their Umapped user ID if I know they have a Umapped account. But if they don't have a Umapped account, that's still fine. I can always add the main contact's email address. So I'll just do like Sophie plus whatever, so I can give you an example. You're going to see it says no account found because clearly this person doesn't have an account. So I'm going to invite them instead to have an account. So I'll just send them, I'll give their email here, their first name, their last name. And then I can also choose the access level. So this is really good because you can really determine how exactly you want to work with the collaborator. So maybe if you're, you just want somebody to look at it. So it's just somebody from another travel agent where you want them to like sign off on it or say it's good, or, maybe just communicate with you via email, but you don't want them to do anything about it. You can put them as view only. You can use contribute if you just want the person you're inviting to collaborate with you to add their own segments, but not do anything else. Obviously, the next one, contribute, publish, and invite, means that they can also publish the trip and invite travelers. So this might be good as well. And then you have the full access. And full access means that they can also edit segments that you made or change things around. So for contribute, of course, they can't edit anything you've done. They can only add new stuff. Same thing with this one. They can maybe publish an invite, but they can't edit anything you've done. Full access might be really good if you just want to hand the trip over to somebody. Say it's yours, just go at it. So if maybe I'm the DMC, I could just send off the beginnings of the activities and stuff, and then the travel agent can take it over from there and edit it at their discretion. So for this case, I'm going to actually add somebody who does have an account just to show you what it looks like from their end. So I'm going to add my collaborator, who is a DMC. They have an account, that's all good. And I'm going to give them contribute, publish, and invite. I'll give them that much because that's probably enough. And then of course I can leave them a note. That's always a possibility, but I don't need to. And then I'll add them as a collaborator. Now, I'm just going to sign out real quick so I can sign in as the DMC collaborator so I can show you what it looks like from their perspective. So I'm going to log in. They're going to be able to find the trip that you just invited them to under trips shared with me. Of course, they're also going to get an email about it, but we're not going to bother with that for now. We're just going to find where the actual trip is. You can see, here we go, trip across Canada. I can see who it was created by, and I can even see my access level. So I'll go into that trip, and you can see I can click the plus button and add stuff. I can add the travelers if I like. I can even republish the trip if I like, but I can't edit anything here. Like I can't delete this note. I can't edit this note. I can't add anything to it. That's all locked down. So I can maybe add, an activity because I'm the collaborator. This isn't in Canada, but I'm going to add Aspen Highlands because I made that as one of my vendors a while ago, and I'll add to trip, add a couple of things there, and then I can send it off to a traveler. So that's all well and good. And now the other thing that the travel agent can do, so if I go log out and go back in as the travel advisor, I'll go to Trip Across Canada. You can see here, that's the segment that was just added. And by the way, if you're the travel agent, you can also go back to that audit log and you'll see, there we go. I can see exactly what my DMC collab did. So really good, by the way, if you ever just want to keep in touch, see what's going on, maybe I can see where DMC collab left off so I know where to start. Now we're going to talk a little bit about the co-branding aspect. Now, the co-branding aspect is really only going to be, I think, available for, are we part of the same company? Maybe DMC Collab is in the same company as me. Just a second. I just want to make sure they're not in a different company. DMC Collab. Trip shared with me, trips across Canada, settings. Oh, we're in the same company. That's not great. Let me add somebody who's in a different company. Okay, let's do travel advisor, trips across Canada. We'll add collaborator. And we'll add, I think Sophie Yu is in another company. Let's do that. Okay. Settings. Oh, there we go. Okay. So because I just added somebody that's in another company, when I go back to my settings, under the place where it says trip branding, I'm going to actually see her company branding. Now, by default, my company branding is going to be the primary contact. That's going to be at the very top of the, I'll show you, it's going to be at the top of the web view, top of the PDF, the top of everything. Let's get that web view open. So right now, the other branding is hidden and my branding is the primary right there. And of course, I do have the option by clicking on the options icon just to the right to make this visible. In which case, if I refresh my web view, I'm going to see not only my branding, but also that other company branding. So that other company logo and that other company name. I'm not going to see any agent details, by the way, because the agent details only apply to the person that published the trip, but I will see the other logo. And I can also reverse it and make them the primary branding if I want to. And now mine's going to be the secondary branding. And voila. Although again, of course, the agent details are still my agent details. And that's because I'm the one that published the trip. The only way that this would be changed is if that other person, in this case, the agent from this company was to republish the trip, because you only can show one agent's details at a time per trip at the top. This might change in the future, by the way, I'm not 100% sure, but for the moment, by the way, sorry, only one agent's details are going to display. So if I wanted the other person to take over as the lead agent, I could just have them republish the trip. Otherwise, a good workaround for this is always, in the top of your trip, you can create a note with the other agent details. Maybe could be called just agent details. You might want to make it really fancy and add a little table. And maybe the table can be like first name and email address. I can add more columns maybe and also do one for last name, for address, for emergency contact information, all that stuff. And then just say like Sophie and sophie@umapped.com. Save that. And that can go to the very, again, we'll just drag and drop this to the top of my trip. And that can sit right up here at the top. That's a good workaround where if you want multiple agent details to appear on a trip, just because at the moment, like I said, there's only going to be that one agent's details on your trip in the branding part right here. And the only way you can replace that is have the other person republish the trip. But if you want to work around, let's just refresh this. First thing my travelers see is all of these additional agent details if I had other people's names on it. So that's a good way to work around that. This may change in the future. It would be also helpful to know how many people would like to see multiple agent branding, because that way I can push it to someone on our product team. But this is how it works for the moment. Of course, we've already talked about multiple brand profiles. So if I go back to my trip dashboard and click on the menu icon and click on admin, we did talk about earlier these different brand profiles. These are really helpful if you're a larger host agency and you have these different subcontractors who want to have their own branding on their trips. You can always create them here and give those off. You could do the same thing we just did for the DMC collab and just have their stuff here. But again, only your agent details are going to display. So this is really just about branding for the company level. We're not talking about agent details when we talk about multiple brand profile or collaborators unless they republish. Okay, so let me see if I have, there's quite a lot of questions. I don't want to go over too much right now because we are like 15 minutes over, but I'm going to try to do like 2 more questions and then we'll go. And then of course, I always respond to everybody via email later on. What's a good way to do? Okay, so we answered that one. Someone anonymous asked, are these recorded sessions only available for a limited time? Good question. No, I save them to our YouTube channel. They're just unlisted. And then I send that link to every single person that registered. And then otherwise, we always, at the end of the series, put together this landing page, kind of like this. And you can see here, it's got all of the different things. This is the one we did last August, by the way. So it has all of the recordings as well as a little overview of what to do. And this is just a little like sneak peek right now, but we're actually updating our website to include some stuff like this. So coming probably in 2021, our updated website is going to have these landing pages. As it is, if you go to our support portal, you can also just find the recordings under the webinar tab. I put everything here. So this is where you can find the introductory webinar, the Working Smart webinar from July, although this is super out of date now because the UI changed, but also Bootcamp, all of Beyond the Basics, the workflow introduction to Umapped webinar that I did back in October, all of that's here. So it's never gonna disappear. Even stuff that goes out of date, like Working Smart, where it doesn't really look the same anymore, so it might not make the same sense. Like, you'll see here, it doesn't look like this on the left anymore, but all of the content is essentially the same. But I leave everything there so anyone could watch these at any time. Okay, so let me just see if there's one more question and then we'll get going. Let's see, is there a question that I didn't answer? Petra asked, if we sync from client base and then manually change a segment in Umapped and then later add something to client base, will that undo the manual change I made in Umapped? Okay, really good question, actually, because that's true. At the moment, the client base sync, actually, I'll pull up a trip that I made earlier. Client base, it's in a past trip, so I'll just pull it up. So this is I was doing some testing with client base because I wanted to see exactly what was coming through. When you do have the client base sync integration, it is an override sync. So if I took this air segment in from client base, at the moment, any changes that I made to this is going to be automatically overridden every like 3 hours. Like if I click on the messenger up here, by the way, you'll see these are all of the different instances when the trip got updated from whatever was in client base. So I would really, really say if you have client base sync and you need to make modifications to stuff, um, well, first of all, make those modifications within client base. We are looking at making some improvements in the future to where these different remarks go. But at the moment, if you need to make any changes to something, I would really recommend making a note or adding another segment that doesn't have a link to client base, because these are all linked to client base, and this is just going to update to whatever it was in client base. So don't make any manual changes to something that comes from client base here. All right, so I think I don't really have time to get to any other questions. I know there are still some I didn't answer, but I went like 20 minutes over, and I'm really grateful that anybody's still even here. So I will email all of you afterwards. And if I missed anything or if a question comes to you guys later on, you can always reach out to us at support@umapped.com, and we'll get back to you as soon as we can. If this is Yeah. So have a great rest of your day, everybody. Thank you so much for attending. And I hope this was helpful. And let us know, by the way, if you have any feedback from this series, anything that you would like to see in the future, anything that you think would be interesting having its own separate webinar about, because these get changed and modified as I receive feedback from people. Since we've done like 2 boot camps today, the next one is going to be entirely informed by whatever feedback I get. So thanks again, everybody, and take care.